The Nile Valley, roughly 13,000 years ago. The last ice age is ending. Rivers are shifting course. Food is getting harder to find. At a place called Jebel Sahaba, a small community is just trying to survive. They fish the river. They gather wild grain. They bury their dead with care, laid out gently in the sand. But archaeologists digging here found something chilling. Dozens of skeletons. Many still carry stone points lodged in bone. This wasn't an accident. It looks like one of the earliest known chapters of organized human violence. This became the pattern that, centuries later, built armies, empires, and the very idea of the state. So how did a handful of hungry foragers turn into legions marching under banners? This is the story of how war was never invented in a single moment. It was assembled, piece by piece, out of hunger, land, and fear.
Start with the basics. For most of human history, we lived in small bands, 50 people, maybe less, constantly moving, following herds and seasons. Conflict existed, sure, but it looked different. A grudge, a raid, a killing. Personal, not organized. Jebel Sahaba changed that picture. The site dates to around 13,000 years ago, in what is now Sudan. Roughly 40 individuals were buried there. Many showed wounds from projectiles. Some were struck multiple times. This suggests repeated, sustained conflict, not a single skirmish. Why here? Why then? The Ice Age was ending. The Nile's flow was becoming unpredictable. Fertile ground was shrinking. Groups were being pushed into the same narrow strips of land. Scarcity was forcing strangers into contact. Contact bred competition. Competition, eventually, bred violence. That fix created a new problem.
Once one group succeeded through force, others had to respond in kind. Defense required organization. Organization required leaders. Leaders required loyalty from the group. This is where the story's central irony first appears. Survival strategies built for cooperation were now being turned toward killing. The next real breakthrough came with agriculture, starting around 10,000 BCE in the Fertile Crescent. Farming solved the food problem, but it created a bigger one. Farms meant fixed land. Fixed land meant something worth defending and worth stealing. Grain could be stored. Stored grain could be seized. Suddenly, raiding wasn't just about hunger. It was about accumulated wealth. Villages like Çatalhöyük in modern Turkey show early defensive clustering. Homes built wall to wall, entered only from the roof. That's not architecture born of comfort. That's architecture born of fear. Population density rose sharply with farming. More people meant more potential conflict over the same resources. And here's the fork in the road. Some communities responded by building walls. Others responded by building armies instead. Jericho, by around 8000 BCE, had already built a massive stone wall and tower. That's one of the earliest fortifications on Earth. Defense was now a full-time architectural project. It reshaped how entire communities organized their labor and their lives. Walls solved one problem. They created another. Walls are expensive. They require coordinated labor, planning, and someone in charge of the project. That someone gained power.
Defense infrastructure quietly built the first hierarchies. Around 7500 BCE, evidence from sites like Çayini in modern Turkey shows something new. A specialized building, possibly used for something ritual, containing skulls and blood residue. Some researchers read this as evidence of early organized violence, tied to belief systems, not just survival. Killing was starting to carry meaning beyond the immediate fight. This is the echo worth pausing on. Just like Jebel Sahaba, force was becoming woven into identity, not just necessity. The next real shift came with metal. Bronze arrived around 3300 BCE in the Near East. Bronze changed everything about fighting. It made weapons sharper, more durable, and far more lethal than stone or wood. But bronze was expensive. Tin and copper had to be traded across huge distances to make it. That fix created a new problem. Only the wealthy could arm themselves well. Weapons became a marker of status, not just survival. Elite warriors emerged. Chariots followed soon after, around 2000 BCE, first in the Eurasian steppes. Chariots demanded specialists, drivers, archers, trained horses, skilled craftsmen to build and maintain them. You couldn't hand a chariot to a farmer and expect a fighting force. You needed dedicated, trained personnel. This is the fork that mattered most for us.
Warfare split away from ordinary life entirely. It became a profession, a class of people whose only job was violence. By around 2500 BCE in Sumer, we see the first standing armies, soldiers who trained constantly, paid by a central authority. The standard of a small mosaic box from this era, actually depicts ranked infantry marching in formation. Discipline had become visual, almost ceremonial. States needed these armies to protect trade routes, borders, and stored grain. And armies, once formed, needed something to do. War stopped being a response to scarcity. It became a tool of expansion, ambition, and control. By around 2350 BCE, Sargon of Akkad had built the first true empire through conquest. His army stretched from the Persian Gulf toward the Mediterranean. War was no longer local. It was now a mechanism for building empires. Writing itself, developed slightly earlier in Sumer, was quickly adapted for military use. Ration lists, troop counts, campaign records. Bureaucracy and warfare grew up together. Each one made the other more efficient, more permanent, more inescapable. So, what actually happened across all of it? War wasn't invented by one furious genius or one single battle. It was built the same way a river carves a canyon, slowly, through pressure, repeated over thousands of years. Scarcity forced people together. Grain gave them something to defend. Walls gave someone power. Bronze gave that power a weapon. Chariots gave it a profession. Writing gave it a memory that never forgot how to fight again. Go back to that riverbank in Sudan, 13,000 years ago. Those bodies weren't soldiers. They were just people, caught in the first ripple of something that hadn't been named yet. It would take 10,000 years to build the armies, the empires, the ranks and banners. But it started exactly like this. Not with a declaration, with a spear, a stranger, and not enough food. War wasn't invented. It accumulated.